Hello. Both Sweden and Germany believe in openness and transparency, and because of that, we are happy to share some information with you about our meeting today. Today, Heiko and I discussed the importance of the EU in time of crisis, both for the international coordination and cooperation and for the EU's global role in trade, foreign policy, peace and security. I thanked Heiko for excellent cooperation in the repatriation of Swedes and for the fact that Germany remains open for transit. We confirmed the importance of multilateral cooperation to manage this crisis. Strong support for the WHO remains critical. It is also critical that the EU continue to supporting the Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire. We also discussed the strong role that the EU have in standing up for fundamental principles and values such as human rights, democracy and the rule of law in crisis. Joint efforts to countering disinformation must continue. In time of crisis, it's also important that we limit the negative consequences of restriction of free movement of people, especially workers that commute across our borders. We have also discussed the situation in Ukraine and the implementation of the Minsk agreements. I visited Kyiv and the line of contact Stasinya Lushanska in March and witnessed the very difficult situation the local population has. We agree that more must be done to implement these agreements and that Russia in particular needs to assume responsibility. We also agree that the restriction of freedom of movement for the OSCE monitors in the areas not controlled by the government are completely unacceptable. For our part, we underline that we fully support the efforts in the Trilateral Contact Group and the Normandy format. As incoming OSCE chair, we look forward to working closely with Germany on this file. Today, Heiko and I also confirmed the progress in our bilateral like-minded initiative, which will further deepen and broaden our already close cooperation in a number of areas. Let me emphasize that Sweden and Germany are committed to promote concrete progress on nuclear disarmament. We are working jointly in this regard through our initiative launched the 11th of June last year, gathering 16 countries with a constructive disarmament engagement. And we have a particular message to deliver in this regard. A pandemic could be compared to an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction in slow motion. We must show the same resolve in countering both. In the next few days and weeks, 190 governments were supposed to meet in New York for the review conference on the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the entry into force of the treaty. It is our common responsibility to secure its future and revitalize nuclear disarmament. The COVID-19 crisis has left no choice to postpone the NPT review conference. But our engagement will not be suspended. It remains as strong as ever. There is an opportunity to be seized. We have gained more time to bridge the gaps and identify common ground. Time to activate the full potential of diplomacy. Nuclear weapon states have a leadership role to play. We want them to take concrete action. The Stockholm Initiative participants have jointly proposed a whole set of measures, stepping stone to advance nuclear disarmament, and we stand ready for discussion on how to turn them into reality. And by that, I would leave the floor to my friend and colleague, Foreign Minister Maas, please.
Thank you, Ann. I'm delighted that we had the opportunity to talk in depth today, at least digitally. I would, of course, have preferred to have met you in person, and I hope that this will soon be the case, because Sweden and Germany have excellent bilateral cooperation, and we are on the same side when it comes to major international topics, and we would like to further intensify cooperation with Sweden. Of course, we have also talked about cooperation in times of the corona crisis. It is very important indeed that we share our experiences with regards to this so that we can learn from each other. We have agreed on the fact that EU coordination during this crisis has significantly improved by now. This relates to joint procurement of medical goods and cooperation when it comes to research on vaccines. It also relates to the treatment of intensive care patients from other EU countries in our hospitals, and it relates to repatriation, as Anne has already mentioned. Swedes and Germans really like traveling, and that is why it is no surprise that on our repatriation planes, around 380 Swedish travelers were taken home. Anne has already mentioned the following, and I completely agree with that. Border management remains a great challenge. We all wish for a soon return to Schengen, and I do understand the impatience of many people who want to plan their summer holidays or who live close to the borders and who need to cross borders without major problems involved. One thing is clear, though. All steps towards a relaxation of rules have to be undertaken in a controlled and coordinated way. Otherwise, success might be carelessly jeopardized when it comes to the containment. However, a Europe without borders has been a major achievement over the last decades, and we must not jeopardize this either. That is why it is in our interest to see coordination at an EU level when it comes to the return to Schengen. We have just completed one of the biggest repatriation activities in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. We cannot and we don't want to do this again during summer. And that is why, over the next weeks, we have to closely observe developments concerning conditions for unrestricted travel. Right now, this is absolutely not the case. The economic recovery of the EU will be something that we will have to deal for quite a while to come. Within short time, we have released €500 billion, and we will need further measures in order to mitigate the economic and fiscal consequences of the coronavirus. We think that this money should not be invested in the past. No, we should use it in a smart and innovative way, also concerning topics that have been sidelined a bit, the move towards green energy, digitalization, and of course also the prevention of future pandemics. We have also talked about our joint initiative for nuclear disarmament. This is an initiative that is very close to our hearts. Nuclear arms are and remain an existential threat to human mankind. That is why our goal remains global zero, a world without nuclear arms. Only with joint efforts in mutual trust and in mutual monitoring will we be able to come closer to this goal. We must not only wake up when it is too late. The time to reverse nuclear developments is now. More than ever, we will need our entire strength for investments in economic recovery, because these are investments in the future. We don't need investments in a new nuclear arms race. That is why we need a dialogue between nuclear states and non-nuclear states. And this is what the Stockholm Initiative stands for. Anne, you launched it last year. We support this, and over the next time, we want to keep promoting it. Together, we want to overcome the deadlock in nuclear disarmament, and we want to support the non-proliferation regime. Thank you.
A question to both Minister Linde and Minister Maas. The EU might right now face its biggest crisis in history. What has been the main problem of cooperation between the member states during the ongoing pandemic, and why?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, initially, we saw a number of problems, like export restriction for personal protective equipment, transit restrictions, and all of these need to be lifted. On the longer term, we need cooperation to resolve these issues. On this score, I have to say I am optimistic. There is a genuine will to both cooperate and coordinate. And despite the challenges, great efforts has been made to find common solutions. For example, to share healthcare professionals, to repatriate our citizens, and to limit non-essential travel to EU from third countries, as well as sizable rescue packages. Thank you.
I believe that there are mainly two problems that we are facing. Firstly, a pandemic of this extent has not been known to Europe so far. So we have ventured into uncharted territory with regards to how such a crisis can be tackled. And secondly, in such a situation, countries have to take national measures according to the situation on the ground. In different EU countries, these situations are different, and that is why you have to engage in different responses. You have to lay the foundation for your own country's ability to act. This is a precondition to provide support for others and to coordinate with them. I am very pleased that we have been more and more successful in this over the last weeks. We see more coordination at an EU level. This also became apparent yesterday at the Council, especially with regards to the economic and fiscal consequences. We have embarked on a common path here.
A question to both ministers. Can you describe in concrete terms how Sweden and Germany are cooperating to meet the medical and economic challenges of the corona pandemic? And what are the chances that Swedes can visit Germany this summer and that Germans can visit Sweden?
Well, thank you for that question. Actually, both Sweden and Germany are very strong supporters of the single market, and we are pushing very heavily together to get a fully functioning single market as helping the EU, as a way of helping EU out of this crisis. And we have supported each other in specific cases to maintain the functioning production and delivery lines between Germany and Sweden for critical medical equipment. Also, our ministers of health are pursuing similar proposal in the frequent meetings of the EU health ministers. There is an e-health project within the Swedish-German Partnership for Innovation, and that has been proven relevant for further development of the corona-related solution. Also, Sweden and Germany have pushed important priorities in the EU discussion on Europe's economic recovery. And we have been vocal about protecting the democracy and the rule of law in this crisis. Our ministers in different areas, health ministers, we as foreign ministers, and also our prime ministers are consulting each other closely, have video meetings and calls. And also we work together when it comes to donors of humanitarian aid, because both Sweden and Germany are very generous in when it comes to this issue. And finally, the question about if we can have a vacation in each other's country. And actually, it will be very difficult this summer to maybe travel anywhere. We have from the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs advice against all travel until the 15th of June, and then we will make a new recommendation after that. But I think all citizens has to be prepared that it will be difficult to travel for a long time, as long as we can see from this horizon. Thank you.
Concerning joint cooperation during the corona crisis, we work together when it comes to joint procurement of medical goods. We cooperate in the research on vaccines. We also coordinate on repatriation. Germany has brought back almost 6,000 European citizens on its planes, among them many Swedish. And we also brought back Germans and Swedes from Mali. Yesterday, we talked about financial relief at the Council, or the Council discussed this. Up to 500 billion euros will be released. This is the recovery program that we need now. And this has been closely coordinated also between Germany and Sweden. I would also like to mention that Sweden, on our request, acts as a protecting power in North Korea because we temporarily had to close our embassy. Concerning the question as to when the Swedes and Germans can see each other again, I hope this will be the case as soon as possible. But I agree with Ann. Right now, we think that summer holidays, as we know them, will not be able to take place this year. All will depend on how the fight against the virus will evolve, and that is why we expect that most things will not be the way we are used to this summer. These are questions by German journalists. This is the first question by several media outlets. Minister Maas, there are more and more relaxations of rules. Is Germany embarked on the path towards the Swedish model? Can Germany learn from the Swedish approach? This is a question to Minister Linde. Is there anything that Germany does that you would like to implement in Sweden? Your death toll per capita is much higher than in Norway or Denmark. For how long will the minority government in Sweden pursue this approach? Is this not too risky? Concerning the question as to which path you embark, you have to look at the situation on the ground. Germany is more densely populated than Sweden, and that is why we are witnessing different situations. So we have to take different national measures according to the conditions on the ground. It is all the more important to share experiences, to talk about what has worked and what has not worked, to put it briefly, to learn from each other. We have taken very strict measures in Germany. We will ease them gradually, but only to the extent that the spread of the virus allows for. In Germany, we also have to coordinate between the federal government and the federal states. So that is why we think that the path we have embarked on is the right one, always in accordance with the situation that we are witnessing in Germany. So I think to some extent, everybody has to take decisions of their own here. The spread of the virus is evolving differently in different countries. We will keep embarking on our path, but we will only cautiously ease the measures we have taken, because we absolutely want to prevent a second wave, because a second wave would hit us even harder, both at a health and economic level, and we want to avoid that by all means.
Thank you for the question. Well, I think that all countries are more or less having the same goal, and that is to prevent the virus from spreading, to save lives, and to get our health systems to work under this pressure, and also to mitigate the economic consequences. And the strategy that each country has chosen is because it fits our countries. So that's why, for example, Sweden has a mixture of legally binding measures and of recommendation. But in our case, recommendations are seen as something that you should follow. And we also are concerned that this is not a sprinter race, it's a marathon. And we would like our measures to be able to be kept for a rather long time. And that's why we will continue with the path that we have had. And I'm sure that we can learn from each other, but I think the evaluation of what has happened in all different areas is too early to say now. We will see this after the pandemic is over. Thank you.
This is another question to both ministers. Concerning an extension of the Brexit transition phase, will this be a good thing? Minister Linde, everybody wants to see borders reopened. Sweden pursues a much more liberal approach with Corona. Might this not be detrimental? Because other EU member states might be concerned here. Concerning the extension of Brexit and deadlines, my opinion does not really count right now. The British government is against this, and last week it expressed this. In the context of the corona crisis, this will not become easier. For us, this means that negotiations will have to be completed during our EU presidency, which is in the second part of this year. So during our EU presidency, we will do our best to make these negotiations a success for all parties involved.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And I would say that each country is doing the fight of the pandemic, and they're trying to save life and to cope with the extra possibilities for the healthcare system to work under this pressure. And from our part, it's both legally binding measures and recommendation. And it's a myth in other countries that life goes on as normal. In Sweden, it does not goes on as normal in Sweden. So I think that we together in EU should coordinate going to a more normal situation in time. And I think that no country should be afraid of any other country, that the governments are not doing the very, very best to fight this pandemic. When it comes to Brexit, I would say that if we consider that the timeline was very strained, to say the least, from the beginning, I would say that a prolongment would be positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both ministers, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much to both ministers. Have a good day.